Welcome again to Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm here again this week, Harry from Fan Owned United, from the One the Lot pod with Stephen this week. Unfortunately, Peter couldn't join us. Just to obviously fill you in again, I'm a season ticket holder in the Stretford end. Have had that season ticket for nearly 10 years. Stephen has had his just a few years more than me, 25 years at Old Trafford. And obviously with our podcast, we like to just talk about the points of the week from match-going fans and their perspective, really. So we've both got our Twitter handles as well. We both put up content when we go to matches on match day and various other United-related content. So do give us a follow. If you are watching this on YouTube, feel free to put a comment in the questions. More than happy to take those. And if you're listening back on any audio podcasts, do like and subscribe on the platform you're listening on. Right, so obviously the first place to start is the win we had at Old Trafford on a sun-kissed day on Saturday. Good 2-0 victory, a solid result overall, and obviously we needed a reaction after two losses. That was a key part. Lots of pluses to talk about maybe, and a few other things which maybe we need to focus on with slight negatives. But overall, Steve, what was your take on that game? What the major pros and cons for you?
So it was good to get back to a win. It's quite a rare occurrence at the moment where we can, come off the back of a game smiling. As you say, it was about the result, not the performance. Of course, it would have been a lot nicer to have played much better and maybe scored a couple more goals. It's the story of our season at the moment. The second half of the season, we're really kind of limping over the line. So I think we just needed to get the result, and that we did. 27 attempts on goal, 2 goals. So I think, it's one of those we need to start games while taking our chances. If we're 2 up in the first half, then, or 3 up in the first half, and obviously not everyone is going to put away every chance, but it's going to make the narrative a hell of a lot clearer and cleaner and more favourable towards the players towards the end of the season. We're limping over the line right now. Peter has mentioned it a couple of times in the last couple of pods that we are making it difficult for ourselves, and I think even Erik ten Hag referenced that in his post-match press conference. So I think it was a necessary result, but we win on Saturdays. I think the last time we didn't win on a Saturday, I know we don't play that many because of the Europa League and everything, but it was in October. The last time we didn't win on a Saturday, and that was the draw away at Chelsea, the last minute equaliser from Casemiro. So we when we tend to play on Saturdays, we tend to win. So hopefully.
Wow, that's a really niche stat. We win on Saturdays. Even I wasn't really. You've really gone through the record books of the season, eh?
That's it. BBC Sport. About 10 minutes before this podcast aired. So as I say, I think we've only played 6 or 7 times since on a Saturday since then, but we've been putting together a lot of Saturday favourable results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, going forward in our general play, there were a few positives to take from the fact that it seemed that Bruno and Anthony especially seemed like they were linking quite well together. Mm-hmm. Also, Sancho was there from time to time, slightly more positive than previously. I think we joked on a post last week about Martial not really contributing too much over the last few years, but he managed to get his goal. Given that Anthony was quite generous in his assist, and it was pretty easy to finish. But I mean, there's definitely some great things to take in terms of the fluidity going forward. But like you're saying, I mean, 27 shots in total, I think 9 on target. Um, on top of that, the Wolves keeper, Dan Bentley, it was his Premier League and Wolves debut. I mean, he seemed to have an amazing game, and no disrespect to him, but a player making a debut at Old Trafford, you would kind of expect to put him under a little bit more pressure. Um, and again, just going back to that point, plus 10 goal difference this season in the Premier League hasn't been the best. But then on the flip side, we've got David De Gea that has got 16 clean sheets. And I think that goes to show that clean sheets is very much a kind of achievement, not only from the goalkeeper, but from a defensive unit. Because if you think about the amount of times, we haven't had two first string centre backs, and Luke Shaw has had to, play as a centre back. Goes to show how well that unit, the back four, has played as a team. So again, few points there relating back to our season overall and how the general gist needs to change. But I think definitely there was positives to take. Played much better anyway than the two away games against Brighton and West Ham. Obviously, Garnacho came on. Fantastic to see him again after that injury. There was a lot of talk after the game in Ten Hag's post-match comments in that, what he has achieved this season. He noted that assist, which was really important against City away, the Fulham goal that we talked about. He also said that there needs to be a bit of maturity from his game. The decision making maybe needs to improve, but that's obviously because he's young. But Steve, how do you see him fitting in to United's plan next year? Do you think he can be a starter or carrying on in this bit part role?
I think it's going to be a little bit more of the same, potentially with a bit more involvement. But those comments from Ten Hag are probably meant to ground him. So, as an 18-year-old coming on for Man United and winning games and consistently playing pretty well, being a very effective bench player, his ego is going to grow. And you can tell that just by looking at him and just the way he carries himself, that he has got a lot of confidence in his abilities. And I think one thing that you need to be wary of is his attitude going forward. He's 18 years old. He's not won anything. He's not won the lot. He's not gone and reached those heights to deserve that kind of attitude and confidence. So those comments from Ten Hag will be to ground him. But he's managed him really well this season. It's a shame that he's missed the last 2 months with injury, but he has come into this team, really well this season. When he went through in the last minute, I knew he'd score. We've spoken about his confidence, his brain, his speed, his composure, and I think if it was Anthony running through in the last minute or Sancho running through, I'd probably maybe 60% faith that they'd score. But I knew he'd score when I saw him running through. So if you can rely on players like that, especially from the academy, it saves a lot of money going forward. And it's a really good problem to have, how much game time he'll get next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you can, produce those kind of players, it's absolutely fantastic. And you're saving yourself, 40, 50, 60 million pounds if you're able to nurture them in the right way. Obviously, Garnacho is far from the finished product, but I think we've seen players right in the past, David Beckham, the Cristiano Ronaldos of this world. It very much seems that he's on a similar path as to where they were at the same stages of their career. And I think Ten Hag will keep him, kind of on his feet. Keep him humbled, which
Mhm.
he kind of needs, as well as that confidence. And and yeah, I think generally, as these are little things which people don't really focus on too much, but they're tiny things like his partner's due to have a baby, that kind of thing matures you slightly, and I think that might relate into his kind of footballing kind of brain as well. So
Yeah.
I personally think he will be massive for us next year. This year, obviously, he's had a huge impact coming off the bench. I think the only thing maybe he needs to work on is having that impact from the get go. Like, for example, I personally think the way it will pan out in the FA Cup final is that if all of these guys are available, Ten Hag will go with Martial and Sancho just because they're more defensively sound, and then try and stay in the game with half an hour to go and bring on Garnacho. That's the type of player he is now. But next year, hopefully, we'll get him in a position to be a starter.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, how that goes. But obviously, great that he signed a new contract. Um, Another point, unfortunate bit of news that has come out of Old Trafford today. Marcel Sabizter has suffered an injury which will rule him out, for the whole season. Obviously, there's no confirmation that he will wear a United shirt again because we had him on loan without a buy option. Big couple of games coming up. I mean, we definitely need to win 2 games if Leicester don't beat Liverpool this evening. How do you think that will affect the squad for those 3 league games, Steve, as well as that big cup final?
It will affect the squad. McTominay looks like he's coming back from his injury, though, so maybe it's the case of one in, one out, which has often been the case with our central midfielders this year. Sabitzer has come in on a loan, which we desperately needed. He's contributed. He has fit in and adapted to the pace of the Premier League and the competitions that we're in quite well, in my opinion. I think he has the lungs to run. He's quite a good runner, and you need that in a Premier League midfield. So he definitely has been an asset to us on loan. Next season, if we decide to go for him, I would hope that it is on a quite a cheap deal. Depends on Bayern Munich, though, obviously. But affecting the squad going forward, if McTominay is coming back, then I imagine that he'll be used in that role that Sabitzer would play in rotation. So you have Casemiro and Eriksen with Bruno as your front three, as your starting midfield three. With Fred and McTominay coming in to deputise. So I don't think it'll make a massive difference, but I think he's a little bit better than both of those two. I think he might be a good mix of both, of Fred and McTominay. So I think he'll be missed, but it's not a disaster.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you think about the summer? Do you think the club should definitely try and go in and sign him? I mean, I personally would love to see him at Old Trafford next year. There's a few points that I saw on the social saying that he's injury prone and might not be good value for money. Bayern Munich know what they're doing. I was personally really impressed with the fact that he came into the Premier League and was, hitting the ground running, didn't need to adjust and played really well. So, I mean, do you think it's okay to let him go or
I'm on the
do you hope
fence.
to go after?
I'm on the fence. I agree with everything you've said in terms of the positives, but the negatives. I think he has been injured a couple of times. He's not missed a lot of games, but they've been just like little kind of tweaks. It depends on the price, as I say. Bayern Munich are a very well operated club. They might be looking to get upwards of 25, 30 million pounds for him, and I'm not sure he's worth that. in terms of a rotation capacity. We've been linked with a couple of people recently, which we might touch on in a little bit, for free. And if you can get someone for free and use your budget more wisely on a striker or a top tier central midfielder, even dip in for a keeper, or a centre back, then that is a priority, rather than spending that £30 million on someone who might be just more of a bit part.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just from my perspective and what I've seen of him, I just thought it was very good from kind of being a very dogged box to box player, winning the ball back, but still passing the ball forward very well. Not as well as Casemiro, but in that kind of box of the 20, 30-yard passes and going forward, I thought overall he was pretty good. You'd never wish for a player to be injured, but if anything, this may work slightly in our favour in that, if we present a case to Bayern saying that, he's a great player, but he has been injured, that might affect the price. But anyway, let's see what happens there. A massive plus, on the other hand, on the injury front, was that Varane came back into the fray on the weekend. I personally thought it was going to take him a little bit more time based on the media outlets. They thought potentially that he would just about make the FA Cup final. So great news, I personally think, because he had the injury, come back a little bit fresher, and we'll hopefully have him up and running and raring to go for the cup final. How much of an impact and a positive, obviously, do you think that will be, Steve, for the cup final?
A very big impact. I think having a proper centre-back pairing, i.e. Varane and Lindelof, will unlock Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw is a fantastic centre-back, as has been kind of shown in the last few weeks. He really does seem to know what he's doing there, but he's a left-back, and he's a very good left-back. So if we have a consistent central defensive partnership now for the rest of the season, it looks like it's going to be Varane and Lindelof, then it'll really help Luke Shaw. On Saturday, he didn't really put too much of a foot wrong, Varane. I was really happy that he was back. He lasted 80 minutes, which that's could he have lasted the 90, an extra 10 minutes? Who knows? But it's really good to see him back, as you say, potentially ahead of schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a bit of a silly question. What kind of impact is Varane going to make? It's absolutely massive. I think. I mean, especially going to that cup final, how are you meant to, kind of maintain and hold down Erling Haaland? Is such a difficult thing to do. So the more reinforcement we have there, the better. So, and the better chance we have. I mean, it's going to be an ask, and we're going to have to be at our best. And City are going to have to most probably close to their kind of worst for us to win that game. So every kind of bit helps there. As you mentioned, we were talking about, you briefly touched on the transfer rumors and who might be able to come in the summer. Two potential free agents have been Rabiot and Tielemans. Rabiot especially, obviously, it's a player we've been linked with in the past. I think we were obviously trying to get hold of him in the summer and even January before. Supposedly it's quite difficult to work with his mum, which is a main issue we found last time, who's his agent, and it's pretty difficult to work with. Do you think Rabiot could add something, Rabiot or Tielemans, on that fact?
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen too much of Juventus this season, really. The most I can really say is his stats. It looks like he's had a great season. 15 goal contributions in 41 games. That's 11 goals and 4 assists. Bruno's got 11 goals. So he's scoring in a Juventus team who they're not the best at the moment. So probably in the absence of Paul Pogba, which you can have a whole different podcast on him. He seems to have got a start in place, 41 games, as I say, in all competitions, 15 goal contributions. He's never going to be bad. For reference, if you're looking at McTominay, who might be out of the door and be able to get a decent fee for him, 30, 35, maybe even 40 million if we're lucky. He's got 3 goals and 1 assist in 35 games. And yes, I know a lot of these are coming from the bench, but he's in a similar kind of mold, that box to box. He does do a bit of defending. He's got an eye for goal. He's big, he's tall. I think he's 6'3". Maybe just a little bit shorter than McTominay, but he clearly is in a similar mold, and he's having a good season for a top Italian side.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we all know the Italian league is very technical, more strategy kind of based, and having players which are experienced in that kind of mold is always useful to have.
So one more thing just to touch on with his attitude and everything. I think a lot of people might have a problem with that. Obviously, who knows? But one thing that you can reference is having Erik ten Hag as your manager. He's dealt with Ronaldo really well this season. If there's any problems with Garnacho, he seems to have dealt with them really well. Even Rashford turning up late to training, he does seem to be very, very strict in his approach to professionalism. So, if anything, he'll unlock a better side of Rabiot if there is one to be brought out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you referenced, he's doing very well in Serie A at the moment. I guess the only concern I would have is he didn't really set his game alight when he was at PSG. He's kind of a bit of a bit part player. Couldn't really make the first team. Given PSG did have a lot of good players in the midfield. He's turned that round a bit at Juve. Again, Serie A is a great league technically, but also at the same time, it's not at the same level as the Premier League. But like you said, one thing I definitely have confidence in, if Ten Hag goes for a player, it is for a reason.
Yeah.
And you can't fault his recruitment so far. So if Rabiot is the one, it will be, definitely for a reason. And that reason will be that Ten Hag believes that, that player will be able to improve the squad. Personally, my personal opinion is, out of the two, I would have a slight preference to Tielemans. The only reason being is that this is a player we know that can perform in the Premier League. There's no kind of question mark around can he keep up with the pace? Will he need to fit in? Can he settle? Players like that you would expect to, again, just hit the ground running, like I mentioned about Sabizter, not really take too much time to adjust. Again, he wouldn't be a starter. I don't think Rabiot would be either. But yeah, I just think because he's had that experience and played very well the last few seasons, he may be a slightly better fit. But moving on as well, there were quite a few rumours over the last couple of days about the Napoli centre-back. Specifically, I've been told left centre-back. He doesn't like playing at the right side of the central defence. Kim Min-jae, the Napoli centre-back, there's a lot of talk around quite a few clubs in Europe, including City, Liverpool being interested in him. He has a release clause of £42 million, which, if a player like that comes in this day and age and settles well and can have a big impact, is pocket change, really. What do you think about Kim, and how do you think he could potentially impact the squad? Just before we go into that, I'll be completely honest, I'll hold my hands up. Being married, I can just about keep up with United, so I haven't seen too much of this player. Have you seen much of him, Steve?
Champions League highlights, really. I think he played against Liverpool this season and did quite well. But as you know, similar. I've not really seen too much. Anyone can jump on YouTube and make any player look like the second coming of Beckenbauer. But he's a championship winning centre back now. He's just won the championship in Serie A with Napoli.
Yeah.
So he's clearly done something right. He's replaced Koulibaly, who a lot of people, when he left Napoli, said that they might struggle, but Napoli seem to buy players very well. Obviously, we're looking at Osimhen as well this year. So are they going to sell their best two players to United this summer? Highly doubtful. But a release clause like that, it's definitely worth a punt. You've got, as you say, Serie A winning centre back for 42 million. Will he be a starter? Maybe not. So, if you want to look at, is it value for money, or will he rotate quite heavily? He might do. I think he's right-footed. Varane, being the way he is, not being able to play 3 games a week for a whole season without getting injured, you're going to need some strong cover. And it looks like Harry Maguire might be out of the door. Obviously, I think at the moment he's United's fifth choice centre back behind Varane, Martinez, Lindelof, and now Shaw. So I can't see a way back for him unless we're really down to bare bones, which fingers crossed we won't be. But we need to replace Harry Maguire, and if we're going to bring in someone better to potentially be the first cover for either Varane or Martinez, then £42 million, and you're going to be happy with a title-winning centre-back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess you just mentioned there, obviously Napoli won the title. I don't know if you saw on the socials what it was like in Napoli when those guys returned. I mean, one thing you have to give fans in Europe is they do celebrate things just at a completely different level. To fans.
To be fair, if United won the league, I don't know when I'd stop partying.
But it was just it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy from what I saw. Like there was a mob of mopeds like following the team bus and fireworks everywhere. But anyway, that potentially could work in our favor in that he's kind of achieved something. We could potentially have a look at it and think, will I be able to win the Champions League with these guys? Maybe, maybe not. I've got the Champions, I've got the league rather, not the Champions League winning medal. Maybe I can go and do it somewhere else. The thing is that kind of price is what you'd pay, I think, for a rotation kind of centre back kind of player at the moment. There's, if you want someone who's of good quality as well. So, and he's a very big centre back as well.
Yeah.
Very big, very strong, which will help obviously in the Premier League. So I definitely think if we can get him, it would be a massive plus to our squad. But like you said, it's difficult, isn't it, with centre backs, because you need that partnership as well, right? And if someone else comes into the fold, can you really rotate each week, or is it going to be the case where Ten Hag says Martinez and Varane on my front two, and you're just going to have to come in when they're injured, or you're a Carabao Cup player, or when we have lesser opposition. So
you could be a project player. He could be a project player. Varane's turned 30 now, so he could very well be, in the camp of this season. Let's bed you in. Let's get you in the squad. Let's get you fluent with the Premier League and the language. And then next season, after when Varane's 31, 32, he could be Varane could go and be the third choice after Kim and Lisandro Martinez. So you never know.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess just have a look this season as to how many games we played, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if it's still the same stat, but I think at the end of March we had played the most games in the whole of Europe. So it definitely helps. It definitely helps. And like you said, we're pretty thin in that department. For £42 million, a player like that, I think, is good value. Um, Another point that came out this week and has been highlighted is that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, ex-United legend and obviously manager, he had this evening in Manchester, like an interview with Ole kind of night, and he actually raised quite a few interesting points. Some of them actually quite controversial, considering he was going to Old Trafford, I think, a few days later for the Wolves game. Um, he hasn't obviously spoken, I don't think, since he left. Um, and one of the first things he said is, when I was Molde manager, he obviously worked with Erling Haaland, and Ole himself approached United and said, "Look, I've got a great player here." Must have been, I think, 17 at the time, something
Mm.
like that. And he said, "I think he can do great things. You know, if you give me £4 million for him, um, you can take him off my hands and develop him in a better league." And that request was rejected by the Man United board and manager at the time, who I think was maybe Mourinho.
Yeah.
Can't can't remember for sure. Um, how things would have been slightly different if he came to United, eh?
Yeah, I mean, football is it's really simple to look at when you've got hindsight. But if you've got someone who has the numbers in a lower league, um, who is available for a small amount of money, you just think, what's the harm in a £4 million risk? You can argue that if he joined United, he wouldn't have got anywhere near the game time that he would have needed to develop into the player he is today. I think people reach their peaks. The players who reach their peaks earlier are the ones who play from a young age. So, you see him at Salzburg playing week in, week out every week, and it's not a bad league at all. Moving on to Dortmund, having a couple of seasons there, at such a young age, consistently playing football, would he have got that football at Man United? And you doubt it. Obviously, you look at Garnacho now. If we gave him a loan where he's playing every single week, he'd probably come back the season after next as a £60 million player. So it's all kind of what ifs. Would he have developed, or would he have been happy as a bit part player at age 17 or 18, or even in the under 21s? You don't know, but it looks like a disgraceful decision to not bring him in. So that's just the Glazers for you, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. But I mean, I do get your point. I mean, over the years, there have been some players that have come to United that we've signed, that I've always thought, if they had a couple of years elsewhere, it could have come to United as a better player. I think one example was Memphis Depay. I
Mm-hmm.
think he came to United far too young. We couldn't really give him the game time to develop. He left. I mean, at Barcelona, he had a spell where he was quite good, and now it's kind of fell back a little bit in out of the spotlight. But I mean, players like that, like you said, they do need to develop. And Haaland obviously needed his game time, but at the same time, like you mentioned, could have bought him and sent him out on loan.
Yeah.
Just for example, like we've done with Ahmad. Obviously, we didn't buy him; he came through the system, but there's a big problem Ten Hag has now next year with Ahmad, because he's had such a great season. He must be thinking he can come back and have an impact at
Yeah.
United, or does he loan him out again and try and get him into a club that will play him every week? So there are a few points, with young players like that, but obviously having Haaland on your books would have been better than not having him at all, and
Of
especially
course.
being at City. Another statement he made was the Glazers have to go, which is a pretty strong statement to come out with. Um, He obviously mentioned the training ground or Old Trafford needs to be redeveloped. Um, we all know that's the case. I mean, even Cristiano Ronaldo made those points in his interview um, with Piers Morgan. But I think it does make a difference when you're employed by the club to make those comments versus when you've been with the club and now you've left.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all fairly obvious, but you know, he was quite brave, right, to raise those points.
It is brave, although it's nothing new.
Yeah,
A lot of, in fact, I think actually almost all of the ex-managers have had something negative to say about the ownership. Definitely Mourinho, Ranić, um, and obviously now Solskjaer in more recent memory. Yeah, it's nothing new. It's that they've run the club into a state of well, it's flux, isn't it? Really, you know, we've been just about average for long enough now, and you know, obviously, new ownership's needed. With the whole Glazers must go. There's obviously a couple of different parties interested in what capacities. You know, you've got the full sale only party, which, you know, absolutely the Glazers must go, but at kind of what cost in terms of the Qatari ownership, or if Jim Ratcliffe comes in and buys the club, the Glazers might be kept on to some regard, but not any sort of control. It might just be a kind of financial shareholder. I mean, they were shareholders before they took over, so they've
yeah,
been involved with the club a lot longer than the forever that that
yeah,
they've owned the club. So as long as they have no say in what goes on and how the club's run, then it certainly isn't a disaster if they're around. But to have them still making money off United is it's awful. But yeah, I think they do have to go in the regard of control. So
yeah. Seem to have this very strange fascination with United, don't they? Like they just won't, they just
yeah, well,
won't, you know,
you're not
just
going to let go of something that makes you so much money. They've
yeah,
got so
exactly.
much money out of it. So, you know, if it was me, if I was getting absolutely cash rich off something, then I'd want to keep hold of it for as long as possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, you know, good on Ollie. He's been there. He's
Yeah.
done the job. He obviously had a few pressures, and to be fair to him, he had to deal with, I think, a much more difficult dressing room than what we have now.
Hmm.
You know, and what Ten Hag. Okay, Ten Hag's a different character, and maybe Ten Hag had some more attributes that Ollie needed to take on in regards to being a stronger character.
Yeah.
But I mean, dealing with Pogba, Lingard, you know, other players leaking things to the press. You know, it was just silly, a toxic environment to
Yeah.
be around. And I mean, we talk about our away form now. We obviously had that record of being unbeaten
Yeah.
away under him. So, you know, he did have his moments, the win away at PSG as well. So good on him, you know, coming back, making some comments and saying it how it is. Um, Finally, just a point we wanted to finish on. Obviously, you know, a United-based podcast, but can't get away from talking about other massive or important points in football. One being the title race. Massive swing over the last couple of weeks. Arsenal seemed very much in control, and a few losses later, City are just one win away from
Hmm.
winning their third consecutive Premier League. I mean, what kind of impact do you think that will have, obviously, on Arsenal? And how would you summarize the season between the top two?
Um, well, I think Arsenal have blown it in in no other certain terms. I think a lot of people are saying we're City just too good to keep them, you know, to keep chasing them all season. They were always going to be too good, but to be in a position that Arsenal were in, they've blown it. The 2 games in a row where they were two goals up to draw, and then to lose so comprehensively to Man City, and then obviously you've got the game yesterday against Brighton, the 3-0 as well. It's been a bit of a capitulation, but you can say that they potentially don't have as full of a squad in terms of quality as Man City do. So it's potentially a similar boat to ours, where their first 11 is real top quality, but anyone who comes in after that might not be quite good enough to challenge for the Premier League. So Man City clearly have those players of quality. Phil Foden had about a month where he was just on the bench, and that's Phil Foden. He'd start for any other team in the Premier League week in, week out. And obviously, they've changed tactics halfway through the season, Man City, and if they can do that with the players that they've got, they're playing John Stones in the centre of the field.
De Bruyne is out at the moment as well, isn't he?
Yeah, but they've got Gundogan, who's gone and scored 4 goals in the last 2 games, and as soon as he sniffs a title chance, he's going to go and score 100 goals in. So yeah, it's clearly a squad that are capable of winning everything, Man City, and hopefully Wednesday against Real Madrid it all comes unstuck.
Yeah. Again, personally, I feel that Real really needed to win at the Bernabeu, but Real are one of those top teams that can really turn things around. So let's hope they can turn up at the Etihad and snatch a win. But I think just relating it back to United, I think Sir Alex always used to say you need 2 players for every position. So when one's out, you can just easily just bring another in, and that's what they've got to the nth degree at the moment, because even their backup players and the players that fill in are at a top level. And like you said, De Bruyne is out, but Gundogan comes in straight away and is scoring goals left, right, and centre. And they're a fierce force to be reckoned with, I think, going forward as well over the next few years. I don't know if it was just some mind games, but I clearly remember when we beat City at Old Trafford, Pep came out and said, "Oh, we're not going to win the Carabao Cup because they were knocked out, and we're not going to win the Premier League." He goes, "We've won it many times, and it's okay. This season, we're not going to win." And to be honest, I actually thought he meant that. Sometimes Pep is, he kind of is trying to play these games. But I felt that he actually thought he was not going to do it this year, and there just seemed to be a point where things clicked, and they've just gone on this crazy run. On the Arsenal front, though, I think it's going to be really, really difficult for that group of players to bounce back next season, because it takes to win a Premier League. We all know by watching United teams in the past, it is the hardest competition to win, because cup competitions, even the Champions League, you can be a bit lucky. You can't be lucky to win the Premier League. It's 38 games, and there's so much effort and physical and mental strain that's most probably gone in to Arsenal's campaign, and to lose it at the last minute for the squad, which is the youngest squad in the Premier League. I think Arteta's really going to need to bring in maybe not loads of players, but a few players with a bit of experience, players of a bit better quality to lift the squad a little bit, because it is really a bitter pill to take. I mean, it's almost in boxing terms like being on top of a fight for 11 rounds and then getting knocked out in the 12th.
Yeah, it's like a sucker punch, isn't it?
Exactly.
You do think, though, that it seemed like they were going to get it this year, but it was almost a case of this is it. It's kind of almost like, maybe not to the degree, but like the Leicester team, they went and they actually got it over the line, and they fell straight off. Their manager got sacked straight away in the season afterwards. But Yeah, I think Arsenal, hopefully, anyway, will struggle next year.
Yeah, and we'll be the ones on top.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, I remember 2 points. One was the Villa game when they won away. I vividly remember they scored in the last minute when they hit the bar and it came off Martinez's head. It
Yeah.
came back off the bar and hit his head. And then a week later, they were down. I can't remember. Maybe it was Villa. And their young player was Reece Nelson scored in the last minute, kind of a Makeda-esque kind of
Yeah.
goal. And I thought that's when everyone was saying that the wheels are going to fall off and they were getting through, but a real shock, really, and it's going to take a lot, I think, for Arsenal to come back, and hopefully Ten Hag can kind of see how we need to build, see what kind of players we need to bring in that maybe are slightly sterner in terms of their mentality, which I think we struggled with, and we'll be on to bigger and better things. But yeah, that's all for us this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed all the points that we've covered and talked about. If you are again watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening back on an audio podcast, also do the same. Leave any comments, and we'll also get back to you. We'll be back again at our normal time of 7 next week on Monday, where we'll be reviewing next week's game, Bournemouth away, and hopefully 3 points closer to getting to that Champions League spot. So it's goodbye from us, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.